Hello, I'm here today with Bill Epperly. Bill is a research biochemist who left the lab in pursuit of enlightenment. He has studied contemplative Christianity and Korean Zen Buddhism, and is a long-term student of Ken Wilber's integral approach to spirituality. Bill offers mindfulness-based coaching and teaches meditation and centering prayer throughout the greater Chicago area. He teaches mindfulness meditation at DePaul University. Bill came to Trillium Awakening in 2011, hoping to finally find enlightenment, and serves the community as a mentor. He lives in Chicago, 2 blocks from Lake Michigan, with his wife, Claire. So nice to have you here with us today, Bill. Is there anything more you want to add?
Thanks so much, Cielle. I'm really excited to be part of this program and to be talking today a little bit about one of my favorite ways to explore consciousness, which is through meditation. And I have I think a kind of interesting story, or some parts of it are interesting, and hopefully it'll be of some value to other people out there. Taken from a big view, in a way, I think my story's been about finding structures to contain and work with the consciousness I experienced. And that has included now being married and whatever work life I had, which all were part of a structure that helped contain and shape the energy that I was experiencing as I experienced consciousness and going through the awakening process for 30 odd years, some odder than others, and coming to my current place. So I want to tell a little bit of a story of that part of my journey, really a lifelong seeker, and through the lens of some of my times in meditation or meditation practices. Another way I think I could look at it is kind of a movement toward more of a healthy masculine in my life. And so that we'll see when we get to the end if that resonates or not. And I want to suggest for people that are looking for a practice, at the end I'll suggest a way to practice, a very easy, effective way, and we'll have a little time in meditation together, and then any questions that, or maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion. So my story kind of begins around, well, it begins before all time, but we'll just pick it up in 1987 when I went to hear this Benedictine monk, David Steindl-Rast, give a talk. And right in the midst of this talk, I had some kind of powerful initial awakening to consciousness. I remember walking outside and looking up at the stars, or looking up at the clouds, and the clouds are looking back at me, and looking at my houseplant's looking back at me, and I was in relationship with everything suddenly. And all this energy was released, wonderful, beautiful energy, dark, difficult energy, all released up and flooding my system. And sometimes I would sit for an hour in kind of a deep state of meditation or prayer, and sometimes the energy was going into all my more childish parts, and I was acting out all kinds of behaviors. So in that time, I knew I wanted to be, that I was some kind of mystic or contemplative or some kind of spiritual person, whatever that meant. And I eventually found, because Brother David had been a Zen practitioner, found my way to the local Zen Buddhist temple, and just fell in love with the Korean Zen Buddhist practice that they did there. And if you've never practiced Korean Zen, I don't know that much about Japanese Zen, but Korean Zen's very earthy. You sit and you breathe into the low belly, into actually the dantian point, the point below the navel, the energetic, what in Asian system they consider the energetic core of the body, the dantian. And so you let all the energies drain down out of the body, out of the head, not out of the body, out of the head, down into the dantian, and sit there breathing in and out with the mindful awareness of the breath. Sometimes also running around and doing our practice out loud. It could be very energetic and active, but always with the dantian. So I took that practice up and ended up living in the Zen Buddhist temple in Ann Arbor, and then moving to Chicago to help start a center here. My teacher really started it, but I helped. And that was my life for about 4 years. And getting up every morning, I mean, talk about like a strong drive to transcend. It was all about just pushing through boundaries, going deeper, going into more concentration, powering through obstacles. Even we were to burn through the obstacles, just burn through all the obscurations and get to the pure void beyond all differentiation. And I loved it. I loved it at that time. It was challenging. It was a difficult time, but I just loved what from integral people would say, that kind of orange energy of just pushing to transcend and excel and go as deep and hard as we could. I was very keen on enlightenment. I call it my enlightenment or bust phase, that I was willing to risk everything, to hopefully get enlightened, as if that would cure me. Big surprise, it didn't, but oh well. And that was my life. So, what do I want to say about that? So, and in time, my time in the Zen Center ended, and life clearly told me, well, your life is moving on. I'm going to go out. I'm going to get a job. Eventually, I found my wife and got married, and there was really no turning back. And that time of that formal, structured practice receded into the background somewhat. I took up centering prayer, which is similar but not nearly as tightly structured. And my practice life changed a lot. And it changed even more when this story starts 30 years ago. More recently, right before my second birth, I was going through such a transformation. And that kind of pushing was just not appealing to me anymore. I was just more into open awareness and just sitting with open awareness, and whatever wants to arise, we let it arise, we watch it arise, and maybe even go visit and hang out with some of the things that are arising, which is very different than keeping the focus on the dantian and just whatever is arising is fine. We just keep our focus there. Very different practice. Is that making sense?
It's totally making sense.
Okay.
And also, it's really delightful to get to know this in more detail, your spiritual background. So thank you for sharing this, Bill.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. And it's not something I have an opportunity to share very often, but it's such a kind of siloed part of my life that if you didn't live with me there at the temple, you just would never know what we were actually doing behind the scenes. And people would say things like, it must have been so peaceful living there. It must have been so peaceful. And I just say, oh, you have no idea. My teacher, his favorite thing to say to me was, can you not be a little bit smart? And we were just pushed and yelled at and encouraged. And it was very arduous and challenging. And there were some Zen moments too, but he was quite a difficult character to live with. you know, and so we were locked in this container. And then when I left that container, the energy, you know, took different shapes, different forms. So, so in time I did leave, and it was already kind of maturing out of that hardcore orange gung-ho meditator energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say even more so. So when I heard about Trillium, then waking down, I just thought, I love this idea of green lighting everything and just see what all is there wanting to arise. And so just feeling everything, letting everything arise, feeling everything. And so when I had my second birth awakening in 2011, I remember how much my meditation changed. It just changed on the spot. And I was we sat with this group called Dharma Ocean near us, and I was sitting there, and whether I focused internally or externally, it was like the same thing. It was like I felt that I was in constant meditative awareness, whether it was on an internal focal point like my breath, or on an external focus point like a sound or a plant. It was just a continuum. It wasn't inside versus, it was just one continuum of things. And you know, I just felt awake all the time. And so I thought I must have completed my meditation practice. And I was also pretty full of myself, but I thought I must have completed my meditation practice. So I would sit in and as space, let's say, and just watch everything arising, and then kind of, you know, like picking things and going and visiting and hanging out with them and checking them out. So it's so different than back in the day when we were in our little Zen monk mode with eyes downcast and guarding our focal point. You were to guard your focal point in your practice as if it were a sacred embryo. You know, it's beautiful metaphor that you're nurturing the sacred embryo and carrying it all. The ideal was to carry it 24/7, always carrying it upon awaking in the morning, to go back to your practice and be breathing into the dantian, and then all day. And so I've come so far to now be just kind of sitting watching awareness television or something, and watching everything arise. So but you know, post second birth life isn't always easy either. And so in recent years, I started wondering if maybe I really finished my practice. I seem to continue deepening. In fact, I've had so many more little deepenings. It makes me think now that, you know, I'll never get to the end. So I started to wonder about my practice, and, well, was there some path, or was there some map of practice that would suggest whether I'd really completed and what might be left to do? And so that led to me looking around and discovering that, in fact, there are a lot of maps of practice. I mean, no surprise, and I knew of a bunch of these from my reading of Ken Wilber, but in particular, a book I found, a newer book, Kuladasa's book, The Mind Illuminated. Just that's what's led to me being here today. I started talking to Sandra Glickman about what I'm learning from this book and from the practices that he describes. And I guess one of the biggest surprises to me, I'm sure a lot of people here already know this, but is that I had always assumed that the goal, the purpose to meditate was really to attain enlightenment. That the Buddha sat down under the Bodhi tree in meditation and he attained enlightenment. So this is the practice you do, this is the outcome you get. And in this little book, The Mind Illuminated, the author, John Yates or Kuladasa, clearly separates, and I'd never seen this before, clearly separates that there's a path of practice and it starts here and we can walk the path of practice along, and you could get to the end of practice without awakening. It's entirely possible. You could go all the way and not awaken, or you could awaken anytime along the path. That the goal of the practice is not awakening. The goal is a unification and purification of the mind, a transformation of the mind, really. So I don't know, is that, I mean, you're a long time meditator. Is that, am I like so far behind that I thought I was leading the pack here? Or
No,
what's your understanding?
well, I love this question, and I think that also in my own life, because I did have 30 years of a really, really regular practice of transcendental meditation, and I do still meditate, but not in the same, like it was all like almost like you were saying with your Zen years. It was very, we used the word one-pointed, and although we didn't have that one-pointed practice all day long, it was still like we were very serious about our meditation practice. And I think like you too, well, for me, when I started this Trillium path, which was then called Waking Down, my meditation practice kind of fell away. It was much more sporadic, let's put it that way. And there was something liberating in that. But I also discovered at the same time my practice had become a little routinized, actually. There wasn't a freshness in it that could have been there had I, stopped to even ponder anything at all. And I do agree with you. I did think of that meditation practice as it was going to be the vehicle to bring me to an awakened state. And that's what I was looking for. So I wasn't really looking at for a holistic, integral engagement in life itself while I was awake. It was really as if to escape life. That was what I really was, in an unexamined way, was wanting an awakening that would let me escape life. And so it's really been a journey to first discover that awakening didn't help me escape life. And now that maybe some practices are not, they're not hypermasculine. They're just healthy discrimination to promote well-being as I continue on the awakened path. And so that's kind of what I'm hearing. That's my interpretation of what you're saying here, that yes, those meditation practices have value all the time, wherever in the trajectory you're on. What doesn't have value, though, is an unexamined belief as to what the purpose is. And I have to really consider that I was the one that created that interpretation. My need for a life without humanness, without problems, without negativity, without contraction, without unbidden emotions. My desire for that was so strong that I'm sure I misinterpreted so much of the teaching that was going to be, I was on this path and I was going to reach a goal and I would not have to then, suffer.
Right. Well, I think, yeah, I really relate to everything you just said. And I think, the developmentally younger people, I'm sure we both were when we took up the path, can think of the goal only in terms that make sense to that developmentally younger person. So,
yes,
I had lots of fantasies about being in power and control and adulation of the crowd kind of things that very much reflected the developmental needs of the young 29-year-old that was taking up the practices, and kind of the hope for fulfillment of young childhood fantasies that I hadn't realized in the world. They all got projected onto this kind of ultimate goal of, well, maybe with enlightenment you achieve this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I always think you have to use if those things propel you into a practice life, then they get used up and transformed.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you get to the fruition, to the goal, then, they've served their purpose, let's say. Although I would also say that post second birth, then you have to deal with all those. Still, there are some residues of those fantasies about awakening that have to be worked through.
Very
Yeah.
much so. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that you kind of use this expression, something like young developmentally, because we could be old in years and still developmentally be quite young, if we got sort of stuck along the way someplace.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They'll tend to be a younger biological person that will have some developmental, portals that they haven't passed through yet. But even people that have been around for a long time might be still young in the development of certain aspects of life. So, yeah.
Yes, and now, and I'm just hearing an invitation to go into a whole other talk, which I'm just going to put on the
Okay.
shelf for right now.
Lovely.
And go back to our regularly scheduled program.
Sounds good, but we'll get in touch again on this next one.
So I guess what I'm saying is that what I'm feeling now is that after this time of really enjoying open awareness, just sitting and taking it all in and marveling at it and looking at the things that are arising and just seeing them and seeing that each is a face of spirit, each is has some divine spark in it, except that piece maybe, but everything. And just after enjoying all that I was feeling a little bit like I'm just kind of ADD, like looking at it all. And so I started practicing again with the focal point and realized that it very quickly started to bring, even my work life started to come back toward a more focused work life, because in my case, I have so much kind of peripheral awareness that that is always calling after me, like having, the equivalent of having your Facebook and all these different browser windows open. It's like my mind has 100 different browser windows open, and I'm wanting to go check what's going on in all those worlds all the time. So I've retaken up this kind of formal practice with a focal point. I've relaxed some, I think, through this interim time of being more open. I've relaxed some about the kind of heaviness or severity that I used to bring to the practice. And I'm just having a lot more fun with it while being focused. So, and feeling that it's helping me to channel those energies, the energies that I work with now, in a more productive, more productive way. So that's really what I wanted to share, is a practice for anyone that's on that doesn't have a sense of what a practice with a focal point might look like. And I just thought I'd go through the basics, and then we could have a little time, 5 minutes to practice together. And you and I can have some discussion after, and then I would invite anyone that wants to contact me by email to please do that as well. I'd love to hear from anybody that has questions or comments.
That sounds perfect.
Does that sound like good next step?
It sounds like a very great next step.
Okay. So I decided after teaching centering prayer for years and various kinds of mindfulness meditation, I made up my own version of meditation, and now I get to I just taught it online and getting good feedback. So it's not complicated, which I didn't want it to be complicated. So that's what I'm going to run through today for people. And I'm calling it mindful centering. So let's take a little dive here. So everyone, take a minute, turn your phone off, and we'll begin by getting in a comfortable posture. I want to say that for this practice, you can actually be in any of the 4 classic postures: lying down, sitting, standing, walking. Walking's quite a bit more difficult, but it's possible. And we'll sit, if you're sitting, eyes closed, head forward, this kind of standard meditative posture. And I want to recommend breathing through the nose today. And just breathing in whatever way you want to breathe. Just letting your breath be totally uncontrived, totally natural. If it's fast and shallow, let it be fast and shallow. If it's slow and deep, not to worry about the relative length of inhale, exhale, not to worry about any of that. And we're going to take a moment to ground ourselves in our senses. The sensory awareness, the body is always in the present moment. So when we open to the sensory data stream, it's always an invitation of present moment awareness. Now this, now this, now this. So opening the eyes, allowing yourself to take in the sights, shapes, colors, patterns before you, not analyzing, just letting yourself see, be present to what's there, letting the eyes come back to closure, opening the auditory field, and noticing all the sounds in the environment. The sound of my voice, whatever sounds are in your environment, allowing them to be there, to be in the periphery of your attention. Taking a moment and feeling all the sensations in the body, just doing a mini body scan from the tips of your toes, up the legs, up the torso, arms, elbows, hands, shoulders, neck, face, crown, just noticing all the sensations in the body and letting them too recede into the peripheral attention. We don't try to stop anything from arising, but we distinguish between our peripheral attention and what's in our focal point. And breathing in, feeling all the sensations now associated with the breath. The rise and fall of the chest, the sensations at the nostrils, and moving our inhalation down into the lower belly so the belly expands on the inhale and falls back on the exhale. And now moving to our focal point, the Dantian point or hara, something like 2 inches below the navel, and just feeling the rise and fall of the lower belly at the dantian point. Some of you may feel some energy at the point, some chi, some prana, if that's part of your experience. Noticing those sensations and just watching and being with and feeling with your feeling awareness the sensations at the dantian during the breath cycle. And so we take a breath in and a breath out, letting all the other things in awareness, sounds, bodily sensations, thoughts, letting them all be in our peripheral awareness effortlessly while we watch the dantian point. Feel the sensations at the dantian with the inhale, the exhale. And we'll just sit like this for 5 minutes together. And taking a nice inhale, exhaling, allowing the eyes to open in good time. And I always say this would be a perfect time to water the plants or pet the cat or fold the laundry or something right brain, not analytical, not rushing back into left brain analysis, but just some time to let the body, mind speak to each other, be in whatever silence has arisen during the practice. And it helps to integrate the silence into waking life, into the active part of life. So I want to add one thing, and then I want to have a little conversation. I'm sure that I was the only one whose mind wandered at all during that time, that everyone just had a lightning laser focus that never wavered, single pointed, right? The whole time. So actually one of the things I love that is that the neuroscience people are helping to explain so many things that we meditators have always experienced. And it seems that below conscious awareness, the mind is constantly scanning for threats and opportunities. And so threats, we understand that. We don't want to get eaten while meditating. So there's always a little bit of a like, is that a saber-toothed tiger sniffing my toe? Am I safe? And that causes the mind to wander. It's always looking, and then a kind of looking for opportunities. Maybe possible dinner, a wildebeest, a nice wildebeest is walking right in front of me now, and I should really be hunting or looking for a job or looking for a mate. Or so there's an aspect of our restlessness and anxiety that's evolutionarily programmed to keep us alive. So I think this has helped me have a much friendlier attitude about my mind wandering. So when the mind wanders, we just very gently bring it back, reminding ourselves why we're practicing, renewing our intention to practice, and just congratulating ourselves for catching the mind wandering. And what the neuroscience is showing is that just the act of bringing the mind back actually helps to create a shift in the neural pathways. Mm-hmm. So that we're just shepherding our brain toward behaving in a way that will be more enjoyable and serve us more fully, because we do need to be aware of threats and opportunities, but that part is so blown out of all proportion for most of us that we're more anxious than is healthy. So and if practiced daily, there's kind of a natural progression. At some point at the beginning, most people will completely forget that they're supposed to be looking at a focal point and just end up thinking about whatever. But after a point, you'll be able to effortlessly keep the focal point all the time. And that's the beginning of this unification of the mind that happens. The focal point's never lost, even if interesting thoughts arise and you entertain them for a moment, there's still a sense of connection to the Dantian. And then there are other stages past that. So that, to me, so I guess that's what I wanted to say and share. And 5 minutes of meditation, but I'm curious, anything you'd like to share from your experience, Cielle? Or, yeah.
Yeah, I will share from my experience, and I also love the fact that you are open to hear experiences from others too. You're just an email away. And but just, yeah, it was very interesting that a lot happened. On the one hand, a lot happened in 5 minutes, and then on the other hand, you know, you might, someone else might say, well, that wasn't a lot. But some noteworthy things happened to me that I can remember. One was that in the beginning, because really the word Dantian isn't one that's part of my vocabulary, but although I've heard it, but it was helpful when you said, you know, a little below the navel. And that brought my attention to the outside of my body, because my navel is on the outside. So then I looked a little below it. And so I first started having my focus as if a little more on the outer parts of my body, but then it shifted to the inside. And it was almost like I thought, oh, my attention can be both with the inner Dantian, that's what I'm going to call it, and the actual location that you pointed me to in order to find it. So that kind of focal point was quite interesting to me to find that I could be both. I felt to me to be more valuable to be the inside focus. And then another noteworthy thing that happened was, and thank you for that little mini pointing to the neurological things that the brain has been programmed to do evolutionarily. But there were some voices I could hear outside of me, but they're not even in the house that I'm in. They were probably on another property, but loud enough that I could hear it. And to watch my attention go to kind of not to like a distant thought in my head, but a kind of a distant voice outside of me. And then to notice that I could simultaneously just be curious about the outer world, as well as having my attention on that inner space as well. I did have to bring my attention back to the inner Dantian, but I realized it could come back to that while still holding an awareness that there was space outside of me as well. So that was kind of an interesting thing to observe. That I felt like I didn't have to be so gripping to keep my attention at the Dantian, because it could be there as well as in a more non-localized way. So I'm not sure, of course, I'm sure that if we had 10 people here, they would each report a different experience, but that was my experience, and that was my experience this time.
Well, I love what you're saying, and actually I almost said the Dantian is about 2 inches below the navel and about 2 inches below the surface.
Oh, okay.
Although it may move around for some people, and you know, these are not, it's not like you're going to get a ruler out and say, oh, there it is, look at that, it is there. But and in some systems it's considered energetically below the level of the chakras, so that the energy flows from the manifestation through the Dantian and then up to the chakras. So a little bit below the level of the personality.
Okay, thank you.
And you know, the thing I would say I'm noticing with my awareness these days is just that there's, every time the mind wants to go to something, there's a little ego death in letting go of that interest and just returning to basically nothing, to just watching, to just shepherding the Dantian. There's a little ego death because my mind thinks it's important, you know, and you know, it's a touchy thing. It's not like the mind isn't important, but it's also kind of developing some flexibility with how important it is, and whether it's actually rigidly running the show and always followed, or can it let go? So I'm finding it to be exercise in trust, that I can let go and not follow these little bits of candy that are pulling my mind out. And it's a little ego death each time that I just let it go. And I have this analogy I've been working on, that it's like the kind of work that wants to be done when we're in meditation requires that we get out of the vehicle in a way. And maybe not in a dissociative way, but that it's not something that it's not a self-transformative process with the conscious mind, but it's something that happens in silence and in secret almost, beneath the level of the awareness, and facilitated by our not being attached to any objects of attention, but just in that place. Anyway.
No, thank you.
So that's what I wanted to share, and I hope it's of some value to other people. It's certainly my growing edge right now, and has brought me lots of wonderful goodies in a kind of unification of my own consciousness that is overflowing into how I experience my work day and other things. So it's I look forward to hearing from folks, and and to any conversations that may want to happen on down the road.
Lovely. I will, Bill, add a little extra to the end of this video that will have your email address on it, but do you want to just say it out loud for people as well?
Sure. People can write me at bill@billepperly.com.
And so Bill Epperly is all just no underscores or anything like that, just billepperly.com.
Just billepperly.com.
Sweet. Okay, that's easy to remember. And I'll add it to the end as well for people that want to. But yeah, thank you so much, Bill, for being with us today. There's a kind of demeanor that you have that, in my mind, kind of exudes some of what I associate with consciousness, as well as a really nice sense of humor. It's been really enjoyable having you here with us, and I hope that people will even try this exercise on their own again for 5 minutes. Or is there a kind of do you find in your own life that a kind of an ideal amount of time, or should people just discover that on their own?
Yeah, well, I started with a minute in my Honda Civic. After I started the engine, I would sit for a minute. Okay. And then at that point I was about to explode, so I would put the car in gear and drive to work. And I just think people should, if that's 5 minutes, if it's 10 minutes, then you can feel positive about what you have done, rather than pushing yourself and then saying, I just don't seem to be able to get a daily practice going. Okay. So, I mean, longer's nice, but we're all busy people. And it doesn't work if you're stressing out over your meditation time. Right. Well, yeah, I think 20 to 30 minutes is a very helpful length of time. And that's going to be long enough that it'll challenge most people. Most people will start to get antsy about not having done anything and not having checked their phone or tended to other things. And so that it's enough time to start to go in deeper. Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that recommendation as well. But I like this. That's a kind of a nice amount of time, 20 to 30 minutes, to begin to, like you said, even challenge people a little bit. But if you're finding that just a couple of minutes is where you start, that's what you start with. Well, and then during the day, when the phone rings or when something happens, to just drop down into the dantian for 1 breath, for 5 breaths. Just drop down, relax the torso, relax the abdomen, let everything go. Just remember your best self, and then pick up the phone. Those are ways to really then again be drawing on the experience of the deeper moments in everyday moments. Okay. Right. And again, integrating the two, so that the meditative experience doesn't get siloed in this kind of otherworldly moment when you have no distractions, but you can really begin to see the two interpenetrate and talking to each other.
Yeah, especially you know, in this work we do, it's an embodied awakening, and
Mm-hmm.
so we don't want to. I love this word silo. You've used it a couple of times, and that we don't want to isolate this experience of consciousness outside of everyday phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
So, like this idea of just sometimes pausing throughout the day to reconnect, so that when we engage in life, it's more from a more connected space. It's connected to a deeper sense of self.
Yep, totally. It's just about, you know, living a richer, ordinary life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Before we close, is there anything else you want to say?
It's been a pleasure being with you today, and been a lot of fun. So, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome, Bill.
Mm.
Okay, until next time.
Okay, bye-bye for now.
Bye.